Dramatic Studio Productions presents a Skull Hunter Books series story, The Bent Knight, written by S. Michael Lear, copyright 2024. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, events, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. And now, The Bent Knight. On a frigid January evening, Vargo found himself navigating the labyrinthine city streets as he headed homeward. The once pristine blanket of snow that had adorned the landscape in December had undergone a somber transformation, its pure white now muddied and tainted by the urban grime and filth it had absorbed. The stark juxtaposition of the city's metamorphosis within the span of a single month was nothing short of remarkable. During the festive December days, the city radiated an almost magical aura. The streets, meticulously cleansed and blanketed with unblemished snow, seemed to shimmer under the twinkling lights that adorned every building. Garland and other holiday trinkets adorned the facades, lending an air of joyous anticipation. Even the most reticent souls, who typically wouldn't expend the effort to acknowledge one's presence, had exhibited a remarkable transformation. Greetings were exchanged with newfound warmth, and there was a pervasive sense of camaraderie that transcended socioeconomic divides. Regardless of financial standing, everyone seemed to share in the spirit of togetherness. The festive season was a symphony of life and laughter. Melodies spilled from houses, accompanied by harmonious voices raised in song. As the final day of the year arrived, the city culminated into a grand celebration, as if each person were part of a larger tapestry of shared merriment. Hugs were exchanged with genuine affection, and the air was charged with an electric excitement that carried on well into the night. However, the dawn of the new year had brought an inexplicable shift. The same people who had embraced each other like long-lost friends just hours before now appeared as if a heavy weight had settled upon their shoulders. A collective gloom seemed to hang in the air, as if they were all collectively nursing the wounds of a sudden, heart-rending loss. The once welcoming smiles and greetings had dissolved into a sea of solemn faces, each wrapped tightly in coats and shuffling through the streets with purposeful haste. It was an absurd twist of fate that the individuals who had extended warm gestures and well wishes on the eve of the new year were now scarcely acknowledging one another's presence. The very strangers they had embraced in a gesture of unity were now avoided with a palpable sense of detachment. The city had transitioned from a jubilant chorus of harmony to a hushed symphony of isolation, all within the confines of a single month. Indeed, the narrative of the city's transformation was a testament to the passing nature of human interactions and the unreliability of collective sentiment. In this swiftly changing urban landscape, where the veneer of camaraderie could dissolve as swiftly as frost in the morning sun, Vargo pondered the profound lesson that the passing of time had bestowed upon him. Rick's contentment remained unwavering, unfazed by external circumstances. The completion of his recent job had bestowed upon him a rare and precious gift, a weighty bundle of money securely nestled in his pocket. The sensation of having substantial funds at his disposal was a novelty that had eluded him for an extended stretch of time. Amidst his thoughts, the foremost consideration was the pursuit of a personal haven. 5 arduous months of makeshift dwelling within his office had worn thin his patience, a period that had commenced following an unpleasant eviction orchestrated by his formerly amiable landlord. A harsh reality had surfaced, neglecting rent obligations for not just 1 or 2, but an astonishing 6 months precipitated the act of casting a man adrift onto the unforgiving streets. A resolve to regain balance and establish a semblance of normalcy kindled within him, albeit within the limits allowed by his peculiar profession. Positioning his vehicle meticulously by the curb, Rick disembarked and situated himself opposite the building that housed his office on the third floor. A grin materialized on his face, genuine and unguarded, as he beheld the antiquated structure before him. An aura of Gothic elegance enveloped the building, its architecture echoing an age that seamlessly melded with his own enigmatic occupation. The embellishments, even the gargoyle figures perched atop the roof, appeared to coalesce harmoniously with the aura of his profession as a paranormal private investigator. A comforting weight pressed against his thigh as his hand found refuge within his pocket. The bulky wad of currency nestled there elicited a surge of warmth, both literal and metaphorical. It was a tangible representation of the successful endeavor he had undertaken on this chilly January day. As the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the cityscape, Rick found himself enveloped in an uncharacteristic sense of fulfillment. Yet, the tranquility of his reverie was abruptly shattered, the timbre of his thoughts yielding to the intrusive intrusion of a commotion emanating from within the very building that had become his sanctum. An agitated voice, charged with emotion, pierced the air. The comfort he had briefly savored retreated into the recesses of his consciousness as his senses honed in on this unexpected disturbance. The pull of the unknown beckoned him forward, his curiosity ignited by the enigmatic events unfurling within the confines of his office building. "It was too good to last," Vargo muttered, a sense of impending doom driving him into a sprint toward the entrance of the building. But his urgency was abruptly halted as the night watchman, Sam, materialized from the shadows with alarming urgency, his voice shrill with fear. "Mr. Vargo, get down!" Sam's desperate cry was a piercing note in the cold night air. With swift and determined movements, Sam reached Vargo, his grip firm on his coat, and, with a forceful pull, sent him sprawling onto the unforgiving pavement just as chaos erupted. The world seemed to erupt in a cataclysmic explosion of heat and light, the building's upper floors engulfed in a roaring inferno that surged skyward. A deafening roar thundered in Vargo's ears, the sound waves drowning out all semblance of coherent thought, leaving behind only a disorienting ringing that seemed to vibrate through his skull. He cast a dazed glance at Sam, whose lips moved frantically, but the words were lost to the relentless cacophony. Sam's grip on him tightened, his features etched with worry, and gradually his voice broke through the dissonance that had smothered Vargo's senses. "Mr. Vargo, are you all right?" Sam's desperation was palpable. His concern was etched into every syllable. Dazed and bewildered, Vargo responded, his own voice tinged with confusion. "I don't know." What happened? The world had transformed into a nightmarish tableau, shards of glass and chunks of debris showering down like icy raindrops around them. As if in a surreal dance with fate, a pair of headlights pierced the darkness, their brilliance momentarily blinding. In a split-second decision born of instinct, Vargo seized Sam, tumbling them both aside, narrowly avoiding the path of an oncoming car that barreled through the chaos, sending a cascade of mud splattering across their forms. Gritting his teeth and pushing through the disarray, Vargo glanced back at what had once been his sanctuary, now an inferno licking at the sky. With a mixture of defeat and rage, Vargo's hand clenched around his battered hat, its brim crushed by the passing vehicle. In a surge of frustration, he flung it to the ground, a token of his exasperation with the cruel hand fate had dealt him. Amidst the tumultuous scene, the remnants of what had promised to be a fortunate day now lay shattered and consumed by flames. So much for my good day. After an arduous and relentless battle, the firefighters finally managed to tame the voracious flames that had threatened to consume the building. The acrid tang of burnt wood and lingering smoke permeated the air, a testament to the fierce struggle that had unfolded. Once the inferno was subdued, the fire department granted Sam and Vargo entrance to the now altered space, their apprehension palpable as they stepped across the threshold of his third-floor office that was once Vargo's sanctuary. Inside, the scene that unfolded was a heart-wrenching tableau of destruction. The flames had wreaked havoc without discrimination, reducing every semblance of normalcy to smoldering rubble. The cherished couch where Vargo had often ruminated, the trusty desk where leads had been meticulously pursued, and even the wardrobe that held his identity were now unrecognizable vestiges of a life upended by catastrophe. Amidst the remnants of his world, Vargo and Sam navigated the scorched landscape, their collective gaze converging upon a point of origin. The fire chief, a seasoned figure hardened by years of battling nature's fury, knelt amidst the charred wreckage, his eyes honed in on the epicenter of the devastation. "This looks like where it started," he pronounced with a mix of authority and deduction. With a hand extended, he touched the scorched floor, a tactile connection to the cataclysmic event that had unfolded. "Must have been some kind of incendiary device," he theorized, his voice heavy with a conclusion forged from years of experience. His eyes traced the charred marks that scarred the surroundings, evidence of a force that had ignited with deliberate intent. "You can see how the ceiling above it has burnt all the way through," he continued, a gesture toward the ravaged architecture above. "Yeah, it looks like someone definitely did this on purpose." A glance was cast toward Vargo, a mixture of assessment and curiosity present in the chief's gaze. "You got any enemies that you know of?" The question hung in the air, a pointed inquiry aimed at unraveling the threads of motive. "None living," Vargo retorted with a faint grin, a blend of humor and unease. The weight of the situation was mirrored in the chief's piercing gaze, a reminder of the gravity of the circumstances. Beside him, Sam's presence was steadfast, a guardian amid the wreckage. "No, sir," Sam asserted with unwavering conviction. "No one could have gotten in here without me seeing them. The back door to the alley was locked tight. I had just checked it before this happened, and I was at my desk all night. Only the residents have keys to this place." The chief's focus shifted, a penetrating gaze directed toward the window. "How about the window?" he inquired, his voice resonating with the quest for answers. Vargo's response was swift, his tone a reflection of unwavering certainty. "No way," he asserted, devoid of hesitation. "That window has been painted shut since the Stone Age. Besides, they would have had to climb up 3 stories." With a resolute stride, he approached the window, his examination intent and searching. "The pane has blown out," he observed, a nod toward the evidence before them. "There's no glass inside the room, so no one broke the glass to get in." The window, once a portal to the outside world, now stood as a symbol of the breach that had torn through his life, a breach that had ignited chaos within the confines of his world. The fire chief's inquisitive gaze was focused on Sam, an intermediary who had found himself entangled in a sinister web of events. "Sam, you said you received a phone call just before the explosion?" The chief's voice held a hint of urgency, his quest for clarity unrelenting. A momentary pause hung in the air, as if the weight of the past moments bore down upon Sam's shoulders. "Yeah," he began, his voice bearing the resonance of one recounting a harrowing memory. "I got a call from a man who said that there was a bomb in the building, and I had 5 seconds to get out." His eyes took on a distant quality, his mind seemingly transported back to that fateful call. Then he started counting down. 5, 4, 3. His words trailed off, the tension of those brief seconds palpable in the air. By the time he got to 2, I screamed and ran out of the building, Sam recounted, his voice laced with the echo of his fear. That's when I saw Mr. Vargo. I grabbed him, and the next thing I knew, boom! The chief's brow furrowed, a perplexed expression crossing his features. Strange, he mused, his voice laced with intrigue. From the doorway, a voice gruff and seasoned cut through the tension, accompanied by the rhythmic cadence of a toothpick being chewed upon. Yeah, you get used to that around Vargo, the voice quipped. Vargo's gaze turned toward the entrance, his eyes settling upon Detective Sergeant Brogan, a figure with whom harmony had never been struck. Brogan's presence was like a tempestuous storm, a brewing clash of personalities veiled by a half-hearted grin. A history marred by antagonism and friction colored their interactions, a dance of discord that had persisted over time. Brogan, I thought I smelled your bad breath, Vargo sneered, his words laced with a biting edge. Keep it up, pal, and you'll be wearing my shoe for underwear, Brogan retorted, stepping forth into the space, his presence akin to a looming thundercloud. Looks like you had quite a party here, Vargo, he quipped, his tone a mixture of derision and mock sympathy. As he moved, a crunch of broken debris underfoot punctuated his words, accompanied by a careless comment. Oops, hope that wasn't anything important. His words bore an air of casual indifference. Not anymore, Vargo replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm, a verbal volley in the midst of the turmoil. As Brogan's scrutinizing gaze swept across the scene, his probing question addressed the chief. So, there appears to be no forced entry, Chief. The chief's response was swift and authoritative, a testament to his keen observation. None that I can determine, and the evidence all points to arson as the cause, he affirmed, his words resonating with a resolute conviction. His departure was imminent, his duty drawing him away from the scene. Well, I'm done here for now. I have to get back to the station. You'll have my full report by morning, Detective. I'll look forward to it, Brogan remarked, his attention fixated on the telltale scorch mark that marred the room's floor. With a calculated move, he used his foot to displace some of the debris, as if seeking insight amid the ruins. Where were you tonight, Vargo? His voice held a blend of curiosity and suspicion, a probing inquiry into the complex tapestry of Vargo's actions. I was just coming back from a job, Vargo replied, his tone tinged with a guarded quality, a defense mechanism honed through adversarial interactions. What kind of job? Brogan's voice held a measured curiosity, a desire to untangle the threads of Vargo's narrative. You know I can't answer that, Vargo retorted, his words a shield against prying eyes. I hear you've been a little down on your luck lately. Brogan continued, his gaze unwavering as he traversed the damaged room. I hear business hasn't been too good. A surge of frustration flickered within Vargo, his response a mixture of defensiveness and exasperation. What are you getting at, Brogan? Just interested in your life, Vargo. Is there something wrong with that? Brogan's grin held a sly edge, a facade of innocent curiosity masking an ulterior motive. Not having any money can make a man do some pretty strange things. Vargo recognized the implication, the unspoken accusation lingering in the air. Do I look like a guy who would have insurance? He retorted, his words a fiery retort against the insinuation. Everything I owned was in this office. Now it's gone, and I ain't got any way of getting it back. His anger was palpable, his frustration underscoring his words. If you have an accusation to make it. If not, then get the hell out of my office." Amidst the escalating tension, Sam shifted uncomfortably, sensing the rising conflict that threatened to breach the surface. "If you gentlemen will excuse me, I have work to do," he interjected, his departure a subtle exit from the brewing storm. With that, he swiftly vacated the room, leaving Vargo and Brogan amidst the wreckage of their collision. As Brogan's words sliced through the air, a venomous undercurrent ran beneath the seemingly innocuous inquiry. "Getting a little touchy in your old age, Vargo?" Brogan's voice carried an unsettling calmness that resonated with palpable tension. Vargo's fingers twitched involuntarily, a primal urge tempting him to unleash his frustration upon Brogan's bulldog-like face. Yet, a restraint born of wisdom held him back, the recognition that succumbing to the temptation would only add to a night already overflowing with problems. A bitter irony laced Brogan's next words, the gravity of the situation casting a shadow over their already strained interaction. "Anyway, this is an official investigation," Brogan continued, his tone crisp and authoritative. The words resonated with a sense of duty that transcended their personal animosity. "Since the fire chief believes this to be a deliberately set fire, it means we have an arsonist to find." His gaze shifted, locking onto Vargo's with a cold intensity. The unspoken promise of accountability lingered in his eyes. "That's a real investigation for a real person," he declared, a veiled challenge that mirrored his resolute stance. "I intend to find out who did this, and see them locked up for a very long time." With a purposeful pivot, Brogan initiated his departure, the aura of authority trailing behind him like a shadow. "Stay in touch, Vargo," he commanded, the words infused with an undertone of threat. "I'm going to want to know where you are for future questions. Have a nice day." The door swallowed Brogan's retreating figure, leaving behind a lingering residue of tension that hung heavy in the air. Vargo's fists clenched involuntarily, the churning tempest of his emotions threatening to consume him. As the door sealed Brogan's exit, a surge of untamed fury gripped Vargo. His control shattered in a torrent of unrestrained anger, his boot connecting with the floor in a forceful kick that sent a cascade of debris scattering across the room. Amidst the tumult, his gaze shifted downward, drawn to an anomaly within the scorched mark on the floor. A dark shadow seemed to coalesce around a distinct form, its contours hinting at something long and slender. "It can't be," Vargo murmured, his voice laden with disbelief and intrigue. Dropping to a knee, he leaned in to examine the peculiar phenomenon more closely. "It looks like the outline of a foot?" The words tumbled from his lips, a realization that rippled through his thoughts like a sudden revelation. The discovery seemed to whisper secrets, sparking a new line of inquiry within the enigmatic puzzle that had unraveled before him. Before the first rays of dawn dared to breach the horizon, Vargo embarked on a journey through the still-shrouded streets. His destination lay several blocks away, where a weary boarding house stood as a potential respite from the tumultuous night. As the world slumbered, he approached the building, a structure marked by a combination of decay and the passage of time. The scent of stale urine hung in the air, a testament to the building's less-than-savory ambiance. Despite its shortcomings, a sense of grim familiarity embraced Vargo, an odd sentiment that bespoke a kind of tarnished comfort. A heavy yawn escaped his lips as he turned the worn knob of the door, revealing the passage into the boarding house. Inside, dim light filtered through the shadows, casting a somber atmosphere that seemed to match his wearied state. The air, tinged with the lingering remnants of smoke from the earlier inferno, mingled with the mustiness of his surroundings. His gaze wandered, landing upon a peculiar detail etched into the time-worn wooden door, an unsettling sight. Two deep parallel scratches, etched with an enigmatic purpose, marred the surface diagonally. Their presence was an enigma that beckoned further exploration. With a heavy exhale, he continued his journey deeper into the heart of this curious haven. Carrying a nondescript black bag, its contents whispering of a few personal belongings, he traversed the space until the front desk came into view. An odd tableau greeted him, a portly figure slumbering in a tattered armchair, a testament to the building's shabby demeanor. The man's attire, a torn T-shirt, hung loosely on his frame, a marked contrast to the formality Vargo often encountered. A cigar dangled precariously from the figure's parted lips, its smoldering ember casting a faint glow amidst the dimness. A soft snore, accompanied by the occasional drool, betrayed his deep sleep. Vargo's knuckles rapped sharply against the counter, a resounding sound that echoed through the silence and punctured the man's repose. With a sudden start, the figure jerked upright, bleary eyes blinking against the intrusion of wakefulness. The man's drowsy gaze settled upon Vargo, their meeting a collision of two worlds, one worn down by the night's events, the other shaken from slumber to confront the unexpected. "What do you want?" His voice, a rumbling symphony of gravel and growl, betrayed the effects of disrupted rest. As a cough and a subsequent hack shook the man's frame, a grim testament to his predicament, a spatter of phlegm was expelled to the floor, a grotesque punctuation to his response. "I need a room," Vargo replied, his own voice marked by a tired edge as he delivered his straightforward request. The man's response was swift, a harsh dismissal born of irritation. "Do you know what time it is? Come back later," he retorted gruffly, a posture of authority that brooked no negotiation. Leaning back in his creaking chair, he cast Vargo a withering look before shutting his eyes in a blatant show of disinterest. As Vargo's mind grappled to assemble a coherent response, an insidious whisper emerged from the ambient air. It wasn't merely sound, it was a touch upon his consciousness, an intimate caress that sent a shiver racing down his spine. The eerie tendrils of that whispered utterance infused the static atmosphere with an uncanny charge, awakening every nerve in his body to heightened alertness. The black bag, held loosely in his grip, seemed to escape his fingers as he pivoted abruptly, his senses aflame with a primal instinct to confront an unseen presence. The room, despite the haunting resonance of that whispered name, remained an enigma of emptiness, devoid of any tangible form. The bag slipped to the ground, a dull thud punctuating the sudden turn, a physical embodiment of his struggle to grasp the intangible. Yet, the echo of the disembodied voice lingered like a ghostly echo, its imprint haunting his thoughts. A bewildered shake of his head was an attempt to cast off the tendrils of unease, to attribute the phenomenon to the weariness that clung to him like a second skin. Dismissing the experience as a mere trick of his fatigued mind, he attempted to regain his footing in the realm of rationality. However, before he could fully rein in his racing thoughts, the air around him seemed to tremble with an encore, the whisper's spectral echo returning with renewed insistence. Once again, his attention was ensnared, his senses drawn to the periphery where shadows danced and reality blurred. A fleeting darkness, an elusive wisp, invaded his peripheral vision like a wraith, a presence that defied concrete form. The tension coiled within him, a predator's instinct honed by years of survival, prompting an instinctive reaction. Reflexes took over, his fingers instinctively seeking the concealed holster hidden beneath his coat. Cold metal met his touch as he grasped the pistol. The familiar weight a comfort in this unsettling moment. The abruptness of his movement shattered the stillness that had clung to the room, a disturbance that roused the man stationed behind the counter. The once slumbering figure catapulted from his chair, a surge of urgency painted across his features as fear took hold. "Look, I don't want no trouble," the man stammered, his words rushed and tinged with trepidation. His gaze fixated upon the pistol, his fear transforming his demeanor into one of desperate readiness. The old man's breathing began to return to normal as his fingers closed around a key hanging from a hook. He sent it skimming across the counter's worn surface. "A room is $10 a night or $50 for the week," he stated, still trying to regain his composure. "I'll take the week," Vargo declared, his voice marked by a weary acceptance of circumstances as his hand dipped into the pocket of his coat. The confirmation of currency against his fingertips felt hollow, the remnants of his earlier reassurance rendered fleeting by the events that had unfolded. "Towels are 50 cents extra. If you want clean sheets, that'll be $1 extra," he elucidated, his words an unembellished representation of the mundane. With the expedience of someone wanting to end the transaction quickly, he continued, outlining the particulars of the room. "Your room is right up those stairs to the right. The bathroom and shower are at the end of the hall." Questions lingered in the air, finding a voice in Vargo's inquiry. "Do I need to sign anything?" The old man's response was immediate, his movements deft as he snatched a book from the counter's surface, seamlessly sliding out of view. "Don't worry about it. I keep a quiet place here, if you know what I mean," he quipped, a nervous grin accompanying his words. Beneath the surface of his statement simmered an understanding that spoke to the concealed affairs that often found sanctuary within these walls. "I don't want no trouble." Vargo's finality was evident in his words, a weariness that resonated as he hoisted the bag containing his meager belongings. "All I want is sleep," he asserted, his strides purposeful as he moved away from the counter, heading toward the creaking staircase. Before disappearing from view, he cast a parting observation over his shoulder. "By the way, someone ripped up your front door." The old man's response was visceral, an exclamation that punctured the air as he bolted from his post. "What?" he exclaimed, his tone a mixture of disbelief and dismay, as he rushed to the front door. Vargo's footsteps reverberated on the worn wood of the staircase, his ascent accompanied by a symphony of creaks that seemed to echo in the emptiness. As he climbed to the second floor, the old man's indignant muttering drifted up the stairwell, a profusion of curses mingled with exclamations of astonishment. Finally, Vargo reached his room, his fingers closing around the tarnished doorknob as he pushed the door open. Upon entry, the room's character greeted him with a musty embrace, the scent of stale mold hanging heavy in the air. The solitary bulb suspended from a frayed wire cast a feeble glow, revealing a scene of stark desolation. Gray paint, its former luster faded, peeled from the walls, collecting in weary piles on the time-worn floorboards. In the heart of the dimly lit room stood an old, tarnished, metal-framed bed, its single sagging mattress evidence of countless nights of wear. A frail and yellowed paper blind hung before the window, its edges swaying as ghostly drafts slipped through the cracks in the aged frame. An air of desolation clung to the space, intensified by a rusted metal rod jutting from the wall, a makeshift closet for hanging clothes. Just beside it, a painted dresser stood, its surface crowned by a wash basin. The mere sight of it seemed to evoke an immediate need for cleansing, as if the very air held a tangible hint of grime. But in the early hours of the morning, when options were limited and exhaustion claimed its toll, beggars couldn't afford the luxury of choosiness. Vargo's worn hat and coat found a temporary home on a rusty nail, their weight pulling the makeshift hanger downward. With a sense of practiced efficiency, he reached into his coat pocket, extracting his pistols. The clatter of metal against the bed broke the silence, the worn mattress bearing witness to the heaviness of his weapons. Weariness settled upon him like an oppressive weight as he sank onto the edge of the bed, eyes closing involuntarily. Fatigue, like a relentless tide, carried him into a fitful slumber. The world heaved him from his rest with the force of a sharp knock on the door. Startled, he jolted awake, muscles tensed, and senses heightened. In an instant, his hand sought the familiar grip of his guns. The room's dim light remained a sentinel in the darkness, an island of illumination in the shrouded hours. The cautious creak of the door hinges joined the symphony of his breaths, and he peered out into the hall, finding only emptiness. Dismissing it as a false alarm, he moved to close the door, but before it could seal shut, a jarring pop resounded, followed by the shattering of glass. The light extinguished in an instant. The room transformed into a cacophony of chaos, the veil of night masking the source of the commotion. A force, primal and relentless, seized Vargo, flinging him across the room as though he were a mere puppet. His body collided with the bed, pain flaring through his senses as he landed with a resounding thud. The shock of impact was brief, as adrenaline flooded his veins, propelling him back into action. Fueled by survival instinct, he reached for the paper shade hanging from the window, ripping it away to reveal the pale blue glow of streetlights beyond. In that eerie light, shadows danced, a fluid and untraceable movement that sent his heart racing. Gritting his teeth, he leveled his pistol, his voice piercing the tumultuous air. But his resolve was met with resistance as an unseen assailant latched onto his legs, sending him crashing to the floor once more. The report of his firearm echoed through the room, a flash of light in the shrouded abyss. The inhuman screech that followed was as unnerving as it was otherworldly. Rolling to his side, Vargo's pistol sought the darkness, firing again into the void, the muzzle flashes illuminating his surroundings in erratic bursts. Amid the reverberating silence that followed, the intrusion of heavy knocking pierced the room's remnants of chaos. The voice of the old man, once weary and sly, now carried a note of desperation as he pleaded for entrance. The turn of a key in the lock heralded his arrival, but as the door swung open, a silhouette emerged. The man from the reception desk, brandishing a baseball bat. A volley of curses poured from his lips as he crossed the threshold, the entrance sealed behind him with a deafening finality. But the room's darkness was not empty for long. Something, a force that defied comprehension, launched itself at Vargo, the impact sending both him and the intruder hurtling through the window. The brittle glass shattered, and Vargo's body met a cloth awning enveloped in snow, the impact cushioned but painful. With a gasp, he rolled off the fabric, colliding with the cold, wet sidewalk below. The pain radiating from his ribs was a symphony of agony, his body protesting against the violent encounter. Blinking against the disorientation, he surveyed his surroundings, his gaze searching for any sign of the entity that had propelled him through the window. The darkness yielded no answers, leaving him with nothing but his own racing thoughts. With a determined grimace, he forced his battered body to rise, each movement an exercise in agony. He staggered back into the boarding house, the passage illuminated by a flickering hallway light. Arriving at his room once more, the scene was one of morbid realization. The outline of the old man sprawled on the floor, surrounded by a pool of viscous liquid. Vargo's hands moved with an almost automatic precision, gathering his belongings as sirens wailed outside. The arrival of law enforcement seemed imminent, their presence marked by the distinct voice of Detective Sergeant Brogan barking out orders. Heavy footsteps echoed up the stairs, bearing the weight of an impending reckoning. "Freeze right there!" The command sliced through the tension, the police officer's stance unyielding as he leveled his weapon, his resolve carved from years of practice. "My name is Rick Vargo. I'm a—" Vargo's attempt at identification faltered as a familiar voice swept into the room. "Pain in the ass," Brogan interjected, with a characteristic gruffness, his presence a harbinger of confrontations past. His entrance into the scene painted him as an observer of familiar havoc, his disdain for Vargo palpable even in the early hours of the day. "Well, what have you been up to now, Vargo? Burning down buildings not good enough for you? You've moved up to murder now." "I didn't kill anybody." Vargo's retort was a declaration shrouded in a veneer of stoicism, his tone as unyielding as the officer's weapon. The rapid-fire exchange continued an intricate dance of words and accusations. "Really? Well, we got a call from the night manager that someone was shooting, and here you are with a dead body. By the way, where's your gun?" Vargo's response was punctuated by a physical motion, his hand emerging from his pocket to release the grip of his gun. With a casual yet calculated toss, the weapon clattered to the ground at Brogan's feet, an offering of evidence that bore witness to the events that had transpired. "I fired some shots, but something was attacking me. I didn't shoot that guy." Amid the tense exchange, Brogan's scrutiny remained unrelenting. "Looks like you tore the place up pretty good," he mused, his gaze sweeping over the room's evidence of chaos. As Dawn's tentative fingers spread across the room, the growing light unveiled a revelation, the slashes on the walls echoing the aggression that had manifested itself on the front door. The residue of a force both otherworldly and inescapable. "Either way, you're going downtown." "Come on, let's go." Brogan's voice carried the weight of authority as his hand found purchase on Vargo's arm, dragging him from the room. The movement was a symphony of pain for Vargo, his ribs protesting with each step, but he masked his discomfort beneath a veneer of unyielding resolve. The journey to the car was a study in tension, an unspoken understanding that the battle waged far beyond the confines of the room. Seated within the car's passenger side, Vargo felt the jolt of movement as Brogan ignited the engine and steered them toward an inevitable destination, the 21st District Precinct. The city's waking streets formed a backdrop to their journey, the tableau of daily life contrasting starkly with the turmoil that had recently erupted. "Look, I didn't kill anybody." Vargo's words held a tenacity that transcended his situation, a plea for understanding that seemed to pierce Brogan's external veneer. The detective's expression flickered, his usual retort quelled by a moment's introspection. Brogan's gaze held a riddle of uncertainty as he scrutinized Vargo, the pieces of a complex puzzle shifting within his mind's eye. As they drove down the street, the knot of confusion furrowed his brow, leaving the air pregnant with an unspoken question, an acknowledgement that within this labyrinth of events, truths might be obscured by shadows more insidious than either of them could fathom. "All right, Vargo, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt." Brogan's voice carried an undertone of skepticism, his tone a mixture of caution and warning. "That's why I didn't cuff you, but give it to me straight. No bull, or I'll—" Just then, the world erupted in chaos, a tempest that manifested with a vengeance. In an instant, the driver's side door of the car was torn from its hinges, the violence of the act sending shockwaves through the vehicle. Brogan's startled yell joined the cacophony, his surprise overshadowed by what followed. Long, sinewy arms reached into the car, seizing the detective before hurling him from the speeding vehicle. His body tumbled through the air, a mere pawn in the grip of an otherworldly force. Before Vargo could process the events unfolding, the car careened out of control, swerving off the road and into an unforgiving lamppost. The impact was brutal, his forehead colliding with the dashboard in a sickening collision. Blood erupted from the wound, cascading down his face in a crimson torrent. His vision blurred, the world around him a surreal painting of chaos and violence. The windows shattered with a chilling crescendo, shards of glass raining upon him like sinister confetti. Instinctively he shielded his eyes, the sensation of glass biting into his flesh, a cruel reminder of his vulnerability. Amid the maelstrom of destruction, an unseen force yanked him from his seat, his body thrown against the wet pavement with a bone-jarring impact. Struggling to regain his bearings, Vargo's gaze met the form of a grotesque, growling creature. Its presence was as unsettling as its aggression, and before he could mount a defense, a fierce kick robbed him of his breath. The world whirled around him, a nightmarish carousel of chaos and pain. Claws raked at his clothing, his feeble attempts at resistance doing little to deter the relentless assault. Finally, through sheer determination, he managed to push himself onto unsteady knees, his vision still blurred by agony. His strike against his assailant connected, and the creature crumbled to the ground. It howled with ferocious anger. Summoning every ounce of his remaining strength, Vargo staggered to his feet, driven by an instinctual need for survival. Each step was a battle against the weight of his injuries, his body protesting against the exertion. Desperation spurred him forward, his numb limbs propelling him toward the semblance of safety. Almost at the threshold of a small shop, fate twisted once more, an unseen force seizing him before throwing him against the shop's wall. He swung blindly, his fist connecting with solid resistance, though the shadows masked his adversary's form. Blows rained down upon him, a relentless barrage of fists and claws, the pain melding into a symphony of torment. The creatures seemed innumerable, their vicious onslaught unyielding. The taste of blood and the metallic tang of violence lingered in the air, mingling with his labored breaths. A momentary respite offered a glimpse of survival, and with every ounce of his waning strength, Vargo dragged himself to the alley's end. He collapsed onto his back. The agony was etched into every fiber of his being. Ribs, mangled and broken, protested with each gasp for air, a symphony of pain that threatened to consume him. Blood-stained, battered, and broken, Vargo teetered on the precipice of consciousness. As the tendrils of his foggy mind began to lift, a sickly giggle danced on the edges of perception, a haunting melody that mirrored the wicked dance of shadows and savagery that had brought him to this nightmarish precipice. The world around Vargo seemed to blur and twist, his senses caught in a nightmarish embrace of pain and confusion. Through the haze, his voice emerged like a rasping plea, choked with the taste of blood and despair. "Who's there?" Each word was a struggle, a defiance against the forces that had brought him to this point of agony. The sinister symphony of laughter intensified, a mockery of his suffering that resonated in the cold air. The shadow figure materialized, a silhouette against the backdrop of his torment. As the giggling transformed into a crescendo of mirth, the figure drew closer, steps calculated and deliberate. Oh, that was worth its weight in gold. The voice that accompanied the figure was laden with a sickly glee. Slow, deliberate claps punctuated the statement, each reverberation a sinister applause for the suffering that lay before him. The figure exuded an air of a predator, savoring its conquest. "You should see the look on your face. Priceless!" Weakness and pain tethered Vargo to the ground, his voice trembling as he ventured a question. "Who are you?" "Priceless," the figure repeated with a disturbing, almost musical cadence. He knelt, a sinister grace accompanying the movement, and his fingers reached out to touch Vargo's battered face. The contact was an unsettling invasion. The gaze that followed, an unearthing of the depths within his swollen eyes. The figure withdrew his hand, its aftermath marked by a streak of crimson on Vargo's coat. With an eerie grace, he rose from his crouch, his presence a tapestry woven with calculated intent. Yes, enough of playtime. On to the business at hand. You have made some very powerful enemies, Skull Hunter. Very powerful. You've been sticking your nose into things you shouldn't. Vargo's, his voice colored by sarcasm as he grappled with his agony. Yeah, that's me. One big pain in the ass. A convulsion of pain seized him, and he spat more blood onto the pristine snow beneath him, each crimson droplet a witness to his suffering. The figure's tone shifted, seriousness weaving through the words he spoke, his demeanor growing more somber. "I don't believe you understand the scope of your interfering," he declared, the gravity of his voice settling like an ominous cloud over the scene. "You see, I represent, let's just say, a very eclectic clientele, who have hired me to see that you end your current activities." Vargo's defiance remained unyielding, his body propelling him to a seated position against the unforgiving brick wall. As his focus sharpened, the man before him came into view, an embodiment of upper-class elegance juxtaposed against the brutality of the situation. Clad in a black bowler and draped in a long, dark trench coat, the man exuded an air of privilege. He regarded Vargo from above, an observer of the suffering that lay before him, his demeanor a blend of amusement and condescension. "And I ask again, who the hell are you?" Vargo's voice held a quiet but distinct note of defiance, a spark of resilience that refused to be extinguished even in the face of overwhelming odds. "My name is Alistair Bent," he proclaimed, the words draped in a veneer of pride that suggested they carried immense weight. "I am an arbitrator of sorts. I facilitate my clients' interests in these matters, and you are, how would you put it, number one on their hit list." "Glad to be appreciated," Vargo retorted, his sarcasm cutting through the agony that threatened to overwhelm him with every passing moment. "Oh, Skull Hunter." Bent's voice carried a mixture of familiarity and amusement, as if he was savoring a particularly intriguing puzzle. "You don't mind if I call you Skull Hunter, do you? Such an interesting name you've chosen for yourself. Though a bit misleading, isn't it? You don't really hunt skulls now, do you?" Bent's head tilted slightly, a grin playing across his features like a mischievous dance. Vargo's patience wore thin, his pain-laden body struggling to maintain coherence. "Have you got a point to this 'cause I feel a nap coming on?" he spat out, his words laced with both bitterness and defiance. "You must understand, I have nothing personal against you. This is strictly business." Bent's voice took on a measured tone, the reassurance at odds with the situation that enveloped them. "Now, I must insist that you refrain from any more interference in matters of paranormal activity." Vargo's voice held an undertone of skepticism, tinged with the defiance that was characteristic of his nature. "Really?" he drawled in an attempt to straighten his spine, sending waves of agony through his already battered body. "Do the words, 'kiss my ass,' mean anything to you? If you plan to kill me, Do it now. You'll be doing me a favor." His words were both a defiance and a plea, a reflection of his desire to end the torment that had engulfed him. Alistair Bent let out a heavy, burdened sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his circumstances. "You have placed me in a very precarious position, Skull Hunter," he spoke, his words carrying the weight of his internal struggles. "You see, I am not authorized to kill you. However, I am not so bound when it comes to others, if you know what I mean." His tone was marked by a subtle implication, hinting at the dangerous territory they were navigating. "You see, just like you, I have a job to do. My clients expect me to fulfill the contract using whatever means necessary, no matter how distasteful I may personally find it." With a deliberate motion, he lowered himself to meet Vargo's gaze, their eyes locking in a tense exchange. The proximity brought Bent's words to life, adding a chilling intensity to the scene. "I will do what it takes to convince you that pursuing your current actions will result in unpleasantness." The threat hung in the air, a stark reminder of the power Bent held in this perilous exchange. A subtle gesture from Bent's hand set in motion a series of events that unfolded with an eerie grace. The floor of the alley began to crack, the ground beneath them shifting and contorting in response to his command. Vargo's eyes widened as a grotesque figure emerged from the fractured ground, its gnarled visage a testament to its unearthly nature. With measured steps, the creature advanced, a silent harbinger of the terror it carried within its form. In an instant, Vargo found himself ensnared in the creature's grasp, his body wrenched from the ground and suspended in the air. The world spun around him, pain and vulnerability coursing through every fiber of his being. A cry of pain involuntarily escaped his lips as his arm bore the brunt of the creature's vice-like grip. Alistair Bent's nod was a sinister cue, and the creature's claws, razor-sharp and foreboding, descended upon Vargo's forearm. With a grotesque precision, it carved two parallel lines into his flesh, the sensation a symphony of agony that reverberated through his senses. The act was both a warning and a demonstration, a visceral reminder of the torment that could be unleashed. Finally released from the creature's grip, Vargo crumpled to the ground, his body a cascade of agony and exhaustion. The creature, having served its purpose, seemed to dissolve into the shadows, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The scar on his forearm throbbed, a visceral reminder of the encounter that had just transpired. Alistair Bent's words hung in the air like a haunting melody, each syllable etching itself into the fabric of Vargo's memory. "That scar will serve as a reminder of our meeting here today." Bent's voice had held a haunting gravitas, as though he wielded the power to imprint his will upon reality itself. His words had painted a vivid tapestry of symbolism, the first line marking the boundaries of a past life, and the second signifying an irrevocable shift in the path ahead. The alley seemed to breathe with an eerie anticipation as Bent continued, his tone a calculated blend of persuasion and forewarning. "This is a world of endless possibilities. Why waste your time dealing with things beyond your grasp of understanding?" The enigmatic promise of an undiscovered realm hung in the air, a tantalizing offer of power and purpose. Things are changing, and you could be at the forefront of a new age. The words carried a whispered allure, tempting Vargo to embrace the unknown. With an air of finality, Alistair Bent adjusted his coat and hat, the motions imbued with a sense of closure. "Don't make the mistake of thinking you can go back to life as you knew it," he warned, his words a chilling echo of the inexorable march of time. "That would be a dreadful folly on your part." The reality of irreversibility loomed large. the weight of a choice hanging heavy on Vargo's shoulders. "We will talk again, Skull Hunter." Bent's voice carried the promise of future encounters, his presence an ever-present specter. "Remember, I will be watching you." As Alistair turned and receded into the distance, a chilling silence enveloped the alley, leaving Vargo alone with his thoughts and the indelible mark of their encounter etched into his very being. The world seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the next turn of fate. Then, like a storm breaking the silence, the sound of urgent footsteps pierced the air. The alleyway came alive with a rush of movement as a looming shadow descended upon Vargo's prone form. Heavy breaths filled the air as the figure knelt beside him, the desperation in each breath a stark contrast to the recent encounter. "Vargo! Vargo!" The voice was urgent, a lifeline thrown into the abyss. "Can you hear me? Are you all right?" Peachy never felt better. Vargo's response carried a sarcastic edge, his voice laced with the irony of the situation. His arms felt leaden, and the strength drained from his body as the darkness of unconsciousness tugged at the edges of his consciousness. With a final breath, he managed to articulate his feelings as the shroud of darkness enveloped him. "Peachy." The word lingered a final brushstroke on the canvas of his awareness before succumbing to the void. Several hours later, as consciousness gradually wrapped its gentle fingers around Vargo's mind, the world came into focus. He found himself ensconced in a sterile hospital room, the sharp tang of alcohol and disinfectant infiltrating his senses. Every fiber of his being seemed to protest as he cautiously shifted his awareness to his own body. The pain was a relentless companion, a symphony of aches and throbs that reverberated through his very core. His head felt like a battleground of pounding hammers, each strike a cruel reminder of his vulnerability. Bound in swaths of bandages, he resembled a mummy, his body cocooned in the aftermath of a violent encounter. His dry mouth begged for moisture as he turned his gaze toward the window, the sunlight filtering through, casting warm shadows upon the white sheet that cloaked his broken form. Time had become an enigma. He had no grasp of how long he had lain unconscious. The memory of Alistair Bent's words lingered in his mind, a haunting echo that seemed to reverberate within the confines of his hospital room. The sensation of being scrutinized by countless invisible eyes settled heavily upon him, a chilling reminder of the otherworldly forces that had disrupted his life. Turning his gaze with an effort, Vargo's eyes fell upon Detective Sergeant Brogan, who was perched in a chair, his hat pulled low over his eyes as he snored gently. The contrast between the snoring detective and the recent events felt surreal, like an absurd juxtaposition of reality. A sense of impending responsibility weighed heavily on Vargo's chest. How could he possibly convey the inexplicable truth to Brogan? How could he articulate the inexplicable appearance of Alistair Bent and the nightmarish creatures that had assaulted him? Brogan's snores were abruptly silenced as he jolted awake upon realizing that Vargo was conscious. Concern laced his voice as he addressed the injured man. "Vargo?" The unexpected sympathy in Brogan's tone took Vargo by surprise. He attempted to reply, but his mouth felt as dry as the desert, his vocal cords seemingly unwilling to obey his command. "Stay still. I'll get the nurse." Brogan's hurried words carried a sense of urgency as he hastened from the room to summon medical assistance. Left alone in the hospital room, Vargo's mind was a swirling vortex of thoughts and reflections. His immobile state mirrored his mental entrapment, and he found himself grappling with a profound realization. Alistair Bent's enigmatic words had taken root within him, casting a spell of uncertainty upon his perception of the world. The atmosphere felt charged, the air heavy with an intangible darkness that was impossible to shake off. It was as if the very fabric of reality had shifted, and he was an unwitting participant in a grander narrative. As the minutes ticked by, Vargo's thoughts wove intricate patterns of contemplation. He couldn't dismiss the unsettling truth that Alistair Bent had unveiled to him. The future was uncertain, fraught with enigmas and challenges that extended beyond his current comprehension. Yet, one thing was certain. Alistair Bent's presence would not be relegated to a single encounter. He knew that their paths would cross again, and next time, he vowed to be prepared. Thank you for listening to The Bent Knight, part of the Skull Hunter book series. If you enjoyed this tale of mystery and intrigue, be sure to subscribe to Campfire Epic Tales for more Campfire bedtime stories. For more of Rick Vargo's adventures, check out the full Skull Hunter book series available now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many more. Don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next adventure. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe in the dark.